Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk through the essay question that you guys had. The purpose of me doing this is so that you can kind of see how I would think through the question, maybe give you some tips and hints on how to approach these kinds of things, and some things to look out for. So the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is read the prompt. The following passage is an excerpt from The Other Paris, a short story by the Canadian writer Mavis Gallant. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, explain how the author uses narrative voice and characterization to provide social commentary. So with the prompt, they've basically set up my thesis statement. My thesis statement is going to need to say what that social commentary is.
I love you.
Thank you, Gigi. Go watch your show. Sorry. What the social commentary is. So theme, what they're saying about society, and I know I'm going to have to pay close attention to narrative voice and characterization to help prove what they're saying about society. The other thing I like to look for in every prompt is time period, if they give me any clues. So in this one, down at the bottom, they give me 1953. So I start thinking in my mind, this is 20th century. This is about conformity at that time period. Maybe there might be a hint of that in this passage. The perfect families, all that good stuff. Think back to the hours, Laura Brown, and that time period. So I'm going to start reading the passage, thinking about what is it showing about society, thinking about narrative voice, thinking about characterization. If anyone had asked Carol at what precise moment she fell in love or where Howard Mitchell proposed to her, she would have imagined, quite sincerely, a scene that involved all at once the Seine, moonlight, barrels of violets, acacias and flowers, and the confused misty background of the Eiffel Tower and little crooked streets. This was what everyone expected, and she had nearly come to believe it herself. So the words imagined and expected kind of jump out at me, and the fact that this is the other Paris. So what everyone kind of romanticizes, and then something else has possibly happened, which seems to have a little bit of irony to it as well, so I'm starting to think about those words. Actually, he had proposed at lunch over a tuna fish salad. That's pretty sad. He and Carol had known each other less than 3 weeks, and their conversation until then had been limited to their office, an American government agency, and the people in it. Carol was 22. No one had proposed to her before, except an unsuitable medical student with no money and 8 years training still to go. She was under the illusion that in a short time she would be so old no one would ask her again. She accepted at once, and Howard celebrated by ordering an extra bottle of wine. Both would have liked champagne as a more empathetic symbol of the unusual, but each was too diffident to suggest it. So I'm still surprised over illusion, so reality versus like your romanticized versions of things. 22, for a lot of people in the 1950s, that was an old age to get married, so she maybe feels some pressure from society to kind of conform in some ways. So I'm starting to think about that with characterization. The fact that Carol was not in love with Howard Mitchell did not dismay her in the least. Back up there. From a series of helpful college lectures on marriage, she had learned that a common interest, so this kind of stands out to me too, college lecture on marriage. So it's almost like you can be trained on how to find a spouse, which is kind of interesting, or you can get it down to a science. They use the fact up here too, which is interesting to go with that. She had learned that a common interest such as a liking for Irish setters was the true basis for happiness, and that the illusion of love was blight imposed by the film industry and almost entirely responsible for the high rate of divorce. This almost seems like satire too, like kind of poking fun at the idea, because Irish setters is just such an odd little fact. Similar economic backgrounds, financial security, belonging to the same church, these were the pillars of the married union. By an astonishing coincidence, the fathers of Carol and Howard were both attorneys, and both had been defeated in their one attempt to get elected a judge. So it's a weird detail to me. Carol and Howard both vaguely Protestant, although a serious discussion of religious beliefs would have gravely embarrassed them. So again, appearances, most important, because they're not really religious, they just do what they're supposed to do. And Howard, best of all, was sober, old enough to know his own mind, and absolutely reliable. He was an economist who had enough sense to attach himself to a corporation that continued to pay his salary during his loan to the government. There was no reason for the engagement or the marriage to fail. So trying to logic away their relationship. Carol, with great efficacy, nearly at once set about the business of falling in love. Love required only the right conditions, like a geranium. This also seems to be satirical, kind of poking fun at the idea of the way the 1950s, a lot of people tried to conform and do what they were supposed to do. It would wither exposed to bad weather or in dismal surroundings. Indeed, Carol rated the chances of love in a cottage or a furnished room at 0. Given a good climate, enough money, and a pair of good-natured, intelligent, her college lectures had stressed this, people, one had only to sit back and watch it grow. All winter then, she looked for these right conditions in Paris. When at first nothing happened, she blamed it on the weather. She was often convinced she would fall deeply in love with Howard if only it would stop raining. Undaunted, she waited for better times. Howard had no notion of any of this. So we kind of shift perspectives here. This is all Carol, and all of a sudden we get a little bit of Howard here at the end. Howard had no notion of any of this. His sudden proposal to Carol had been quite out of character. He was uncommonly cautious, and he alternated between a state of numbness and a state of self-congratulation. Before his engagement, he had sometimes been lonely, a malaise he put down to overwork, and he was discontented with his bachelor household, for he did not enjoy collecting old pottery or making little casserole dishes. Unless he stumbled on a competent housemaid, nothing ever got done. This in itself would not have spurred him to marriage had he not been seriously unsettled by the visit of one of his sisters, who advised him to marry some nice girl before it was too late. Soon, she told him, you'll just be a person who fills in at dinner. Howard saw the picture at once and was deeply moved by it. So this is how I would kind of mark up the reading. I know that they're making fun of people trying to fit into society's expectations. There's definitely some evidence here with the words like imagined, words like illusion, the satire, like the thing about the Irish setters down here in line 27, the focus on intelligent over here in line 52. So there's definitely some kind of satirical diction or kind of poking fun diction that would help support that. In terms of characterization, we have a narrative voice, we have third person, but it seems to be third person limited because we see all Carol here, and then we shift to Howard's perspective here. But in Carol's mind, we can kind of see her trying to logic away that this could be a good match, or this could be something that's good for her, that she needs to do this. Her anxiety about age. Howard, when we shift to his point of view, anxiety over the fact he doesn't like to make casserole dishes. And so he needs somebody who can do that for him. So there's a lot of evidence here about narrative voice, about characterization, the use of diction, the use of satire to show that society has strange notions about marriage and trying to make people conform. With this evidence, hopefully I could turn around and write a decent essay. Take a look at the sample essays that were posted. I'll try to read your guys' essays and give everybody some feedback, and then maybe we can discuss this even further in our Zoom meetings, and looking forward to seeing all of you guys. Thanks.